a wonderful, caring person, very giving, and very determined to go out of his way to help make people feel better.
Max Jacobson has always been a fascinating figure to me, and it does represent the whole issue of how patients choose doctors and whether or not choosing one's doctor, which is so big in our society, is all that it's cracked up to be. Because a lot of people choose very famous doctors who don't know what the fuck they're doing.
It was saddening to read that page 1 expose of My Old Childhood Doctor. The New York Times said Manhattan general practitioner Max Jacobson had been injecting amphetamine, the powerful stimulant known as speed, into celebrity patients to boost their mood or energy, not to treat disease. President John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy got countless shots from Jacobson, such a White House intimate that he was invited on a family 50-mile hike, and to the historic 1961 Vienna summit meeting with Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. In fact, Jacobson's A-list of patients was an international who's who of the 20th century. In Hollywood, filmmaker Cecil B. DeMille, Marilyn Monroe, Betty Davis, Marlene Dietrich, Anthony Quinn, Edward G. Robinson, writers Truman Capote and Tennessee Williams, artist Andy Warhol, singers Judy Garland, Eddie Fisher, Andy Williams, Johnny Mathis, other figures in music from Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones to jazz great Maynard Ferguson and classical pianist Van Cliburn. Theatrical luminaries like lyricist Alan J. Lerner, Zero Mostel, Yul Brynner. In fashion, Emilio Pucci. In sportscasting, Mel Allen and Howard Cosell. In political affairs, Winston Churchill, who got Jacobson's formula from his own doctor, Nelson Rockefeller, Florida Congressman Claude Pepper, and big money Democrat Nathan Lichtblau, who slipped some of Jacobson's miracle vitamin drops to a second president, Harry S. Truman. The government of Panama decorated Jacobson in 1966 for public service, the Associated Press photo caption identifying him as Kennedy's medical advisor and physician to many of America's celebrated personalities. Many patients swore by Jacobson with his brusque and forceful self-certainty, lauding him as Miracle Max.
The secret ingredient in Max's medicine was Max. Very funny and very smart and completely convincing. Somehow Max made people believe anything was possible.
But there was a second opinion, that he enslaved people and ruined lives. Bob Richardson, a top fashion photographer, said he went berserk after 3 years of addicting speed shots and spent 2 years in a mental hospital. Said Richardson, "I was a victim of bad medicine." Filmmaker Otto Preminger said Jacobson's needles gave him one of the most fearful experiences of my life. Some patients were bitter in their memoirs. Hugh Martin, the composer of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, recalled,
"He told me they were liquid vitamins. I never knew I was on heavy drugs for 10 years. It nearly killed me."
In Quinn's autobiography, he called Jacobson underhanded and an evil man. Perhaps most damaging in the Times expose, the prominent photographer Mark Shaw, a Kennedy confidant and a devoted Jacobson patient for 23 years, had died at age 47 in 1969 of what the New York City Medical Examiner concluded was acute and chronic intravenous amphetamine poisoning. At age 72, after nearly 50 years in practice, the high-flying Jacobson suddenly faced a stepped-up New York State investigation. A petition to revoke his medical license charged him with unprofessional conduct and fraud or deceit in the practice of medicine. The charismatic Dr. Max plummeted, becoming a historical footnote with a lasting nickname, Dr. Feelgood. Some 40 years later, Jacobson is still often pilloried as a reckless quack, mainly for his involvement with the secretly sickly President Kennedy at dangerous junctures in the Cold War. At least 16 books have condemned Jacobson's eccentric ways. Ruth Mossy, a one-time nurse in his office, described the sometimes rumpled doctor to author C. David Heyman this way. "Max was absolutely a quack," she said. "Totally off the wall. Out of his mind." In another book, physician Burt Park called Jacobson's chemical practices sordid. Park equated Jacobson with Adolf Hitler's infamous speed doctor, the quack Theodor Morell. Seymour Hersh noted constant friction among Jacobson and other Kennedy doctors who were deeply suspicious of him. To Kennedy biographer Lawrence Leamer, Jacobson was a sinister figure, his magical syringe enhanced by a mystical knowing aura and psychological astuteness. Max Jacobson retained no records of whether he actually laced Kennedy's shots with amphetamines, but writer Frederick Kempe speculated that secret, excessive, and perhaps irresponsible speed treatments may have impaired Kennedy's judgment at that tense Vienna summit, encouraging Khrushchev to build the Berlin Wall. In the controversial 2011 TV miniseries The Kennedys, the conservative producers portrayed Dr. Jacobson as a stereotypically heel-clicking German who hooked the president and the first lady on his risky serums. Played by John Bourgeois, the doctor tells Kennedy, "Oh, I know people call me Dr. Feelgood. I'm not insulted by this. I want my patients to feel good." There were other Dr. Feelgoods. Like Jacobson, Robert Freeman and John Bishop had fashionable Upper East Side offices with celebrity patients. The New York Times quoted one former patient as saying some thrill seekers went to all three doctors in one night, as just another kind of bar hopping. Freeman was patronized by jazz stars Charlie Parker and Thelonious Monk, and by Warhol film star Edie Sedgwick. Bishop treated LSD guru Timothy Leary and the Broadway cast of Hair, led by producer Michael Butler. In 1966, the Beatles recorded the Lennon-McCartney song Dr. Robert. It was about Freeman, though the Beatles were not patients. Paul McCartney explained in 1968, the song was a joke about this fellow who cured everyone of everything with these pills and tranquilizers. He just kept New York high. Aretha Franklin wrote and sang the hit song Dr. Feelgood, a term that entered the American culture. Glamorized by the elite New York doctors, amphetamines spread in the 1950s and 60s to truck drivers, dieting housewives, students cramming for exams. Mood-altering amphetamines became so overproduced and abused that the inevitable backlash put an end to the open Dr. Feelgood era.
These papers love to come crashing down on you and jump all over you, but they never really sit back and ask, hey, why?